I wanted to thank everybody for joining us for our career workshop. This is actually the last one that we have before we actually hit our virtual career expo tomorrow. There will be 3 tomorrow during the day, but Beto's got the last one before, so it's a good spot to be in. And I think you guys actually have a booth, right, Beto, tomorrow?
I believe so. I think
Yeah, I think you guys do as well. Awesome. So for anybody that doesn't know about Palm Beach Tech, basically we are a tech nonprofit. We started almost exactly 5 years ago. We'll have our 5th year anniversary this month. And we just made an announcement that we are going to be expanding to become a South Florida organization. So now regional versus county-wide. Our virtual career expo tomorrow, I will drop the links in Zoom. And Allie, if you can help me with doing that on social as well, for anybody that's watching live. The virtual career expo will be from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. tomorrow. Have 3 different career workshops during the day. And then of course there will be live hours, I believe at 9, noon, and 6 for the hiring companies to be there on chat. But if anybody has any questions, please reach out. I did want to introduce our speaker this morning, an instructor, Beto. He's actually from Wyntalent, which is, I'm gonna actually let him tell you guys a little bit more about what they do, but they are a great coding school actually in Miami. And they have kind of the part that Beto is involved in is the placement side of their graduates. So Beto, if you want to explain a little bit about what you guys do, introduce yourself, and then feel free to take it away. And I'm just going to help watch the chat. So if anybody's got questions or anything, that they can drop them in there, and I'll make sure to kind of yell them out to you.
Sounds good. And then Nikki, quick question on mine. Is it okay if people chime in and unmute themselves at any point throughout the?
Yes, of course. Yeah,
okay.
Perfectly fine.
Awesome.
Good
All righty.
question.
Well, thank you so much, Nikki. I'll share my screen real fast with you guys, and then we can get started. All right, then. All right, great, guys. So again, thank you so much to South Florida Tech, Palm Beach Tech, Nikki Cavas, of course, with not just inviting me today and letting me be the closeout and build up to your guys' Career Expo, but also like the continued collaboration that we've had. What you guys are doing over at Palm Beach Tech has been absolutely amazing. And it's been an honor to be a part of the initiative that you guys are doing in this ecosystem. So thanks again. All right, guys. So before I kick off with my session, I'd like to quickly introduce myself. So my name is Beto Garza. I'm currently the Outcomes Manager at Wyncode Academy and Wyntalent. Really quickly, Wyncode is a coding and product design bootcamp based out of the Wynwood area in Miami. Of course, as we observe everything with COVID, we are fully remote at the moment, but we do have our actual campus based in the Wynwood area. I was formerly in technology sales in the Miami area with both Kairos AR and Constellation Software, which you guys may have heard of. In my time, I've been able to lead professional development workshops for over the past 5 years in the Miami area for a couple different institutions like FIU and a couple organizations around the startup area as well. On my personal side, I do love startups, keeping up with technical trends, the beach, of course, which is why I found myself in Miami and left Arizona, and soccer, and my sidekick, Veneno. If you guys do ever tune into a Wyncode webinar, you will more than likely see my dog, Veneno. We're considered a package deal over at my office. All righty, so I'll get into it now. So as you guys may know, today we will be talking about interviewing the interviewer, figuring out if you are the right match when going into that interview, and also, more importantly, are they the right match for yourself? And really, that's what we'll be focusing on today during this conversation. So first, let's look at what those steps are to interviewing the interviewer. And let me premise this first by saying that there are steps to focus on a bit more when focusing entirely on the presentation of yourself. But in this case, we're going to do a hybrid of both meshing the pieces of introducing who you are to the company, while also allowing for those questions that you ask, those things that you know about yourself, and relaying them to then get information out of them for you to be best be able to gauge if the opportunity is right for you. So what do those different steps look like that we'll be talking about today? We'll first talk about preparation. We will then get to a very small piece, but just a very important to this whole process, which is the communication with the gatekeeper. Then doing the actual execution of interviewing your interviewer, and then evaluating if that position is right for you. All right. So first, let's talk about the preparation piece, doing your homework. By failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail if you are trying to gauge if the opportunity is right for you guys. So what are those things that you want to look at before going into actual interview yourself? And we'll get into detail about what are those how to exactly do that effective research. First, you want to look at the culture values of the company itself. I won't go through every single word, but what do those embody? The core values of the company, how they prioritize things within the company structure. Do they work with charities? Do they do any sort of social work? What's the work life like outside of work itself and that atmosphere that the employees tend to have on a day to day? Excuse me, guys. And then on the job side, right? What are those main tasks that you should be focusing on and knowing about before going even into the interview? What indicators will you be gauged on your performance for? The department's functions, the hierarchy of management, compensation benefits, all these things that are specific to the job title itself that you can pull from the research. And then on the company side, of course, understanding the product and service, goals of the company, what partnerships they have, funding, identity of the brand, and how the different departments function within the company itself. So, how do you do effective research? And main things that you want to focus on when doing your effective research. Making sure that your sources are credible, diverse, and obviously up to date. Before I get into bullet points, I really want you guys to focus on the credible piece side because it's very easy, especially when you're looking at some of these smaller companies, making sure that you're getting information that actually relates to the company correctly. It's very, it's very easy for you to come across, some articles, maybe some social media posting, things like that, that may not actually be emblematic of what the company actually has to offer or the company brand and that sort of thing. So that's why it's very important to cross-reference whenever you do come across information that you want to share in the interview to make sure that it is correct across different platforms on social media, news, etc. So what are those first things that you want to focus on in doing your first interview, the interview, which is essentially reading about them as much as you can and learning as much as you can? Reading the company reviews online to get firsthand intel from employees that's prime. Best links that I've seen myself are through Glassdoor, LinkedIn, Indeed, The Muse, Quora. These are all different websites where you can go in and get firsthand intel from current employees or ex-employees that themselves have sat in those offices of that company that you will be interviewing for. Reading the company's About Us page, this one goes pretty obvious. Checking out the company's social media aliases. Why do I like to point at this one a lot? By checking the social media, you tend to get a really good sense for what the brand and culture is at the company. For my company, for example, Wyncode, if you follow us on Twitter and Instagram, you will constantly be able to see firsthand the experience of our students in the program. You'll get to see their outcomes. You'll get to see the day-to-day of our office. You'll even get to see our dogs. So that gives you a sense of what sort of culture you're dealing with when going into that interview. Looking up the company news, especially financial news, is key, as well as why do I point to financial? Just because there's a lot of different people, especially when you're working with the larger companies, that are really focused on stock market in relation to that company itself. So the representation of how that company is doing on financial news will typically depict a lot of different things that you'll want to know about in terms of where they're moving, quarterly goals for next couple of years, maybe some internal issues that you definitely want to point to before even going into that interview, etc. And again, reviewing the financials and funding rounds is great. In my experience teaching a lot of our graduates, when they've pointed to recent funding rounds or acquisitions that the company has undergone, it's been great rapport building for themselves in that interview itself. Starting a conversation with a current or ex-employee, this is the number one thing that I relate to the students that I work with, that they try to implement into their job searching. When you get to build that direct connection with a current employee or ex-employee, that's the best way to get true intel as to what you're getting yourself into. They were in their seat, in the seats that you will eventually be in potentially. They know the hierarchy of management. They know the day-to-day. It doesn't really get better than learning from the mouth of the horse itself. Attending company sponsored events and joining company webinars, or the ones that they are participating in, just like Palm Beach Tech guys, like this is also a great way to get to know the companies, you know. In the case of like my company was interviewing, and I told my students to go check out Wyncode to try to apply there. I would 100% have them prioritize coming to check out a session like this, so they can get firsthand insight as to what the employees there are like myself. And asking for an office visit. Of course, social distance right now, guys. So, you probably can't attend many offices at the moment, but also there's the opportunity to do virtual walkthroughs of the office, meet the team virtually. It's just about you really going out of your way, differentiating yourself, and being comfortable asking to get the inside scoop and really go check out the office space and atmosphere. Awesome. I feel like I went through a couple slides, guys. Any questions before I keep moving along? All right, great. So awesome. So researching the company, in essence, guys, is just like an employer reviewing your resume before going into the interview itself, right? So you doing your due diligence, seeing, learning everything you can about the company itself, puts you in the best position possible before going into an interview to not only prepare yourself to find the parallels and opposites between you and the company, but also allowing you to gauge which questions are left for yourself to then relay during the interview itself, right? Which can potentially bring up some great things about the company, or maybe some deficiencies that you really want to hone in on and make sure that you're okay with, in a sense. And we'll talk more about that as we keep moving forward. So now let's talk about the gatekeeper, which can become your best friend. Many of you may have heard during a different, professional development webinars that you may have joined that, you want to go to the gatekeeper in the waiting room space and ask them how you're looking. So they can tell you to take off your tie or something like that. But also the gatekeeper, which is typically a receptionist or office manager, can be a great person that could give you some on the ground insight before going into the interview itself. So some different questions that you can ask in that sort of meeting are, obviously the how do I look question, but also, do you have any pointers for myself before I go in? Do you know who I'll be speaking with today, potentially, if you don't already know? How do you like working here? Also, right? That person that's right there in the front can give you some great insight already before going to interview that you can then point to when you actually meet that decision maker later on as well. And then this is kind of a bit of a sidebar, but another reason why the gatekeeper can become your best friend is if you depict yourself great to this person, more than likely the decision makers in a room where you interviewed will go and speak to that gatekeeper themselves to ask, how did you like this person, right? And if that person can relate to them that you ask them some, pretty awesome questions, you try to connect with them, had a solid conversation with them, those are only pointers for you as well. But as I mentioned, that's a bit of a sidebar. So now let's get into the real meat and potatoes, which is executing the interview. The number one element that the interview is looking for is engagement, right? And on your guys' end, by showing engagement, you will be able to uncover some of those underlying questions that you may have about the company or interviewer sitting across the table from you. So it's really a double-sided road when it comes to this. So let's go through the art of asking questions throughout the interview itself. This is on a high level. To show you guys are vested in the conversation and the opportunity that you are interviewing for, it's important to ask those questions during the interview itself, not just at the end when the interview asks you, hey, do you have any questions? And especially you want to do this when you don't understand something. Interviewers very easily can point out based on your body language, your stuttering, these different elements of how you present yourself, that you yourself may not know what you're talking about. And I promise you, they are taking notes down to say, they don't understand what we're speaking about today. So you should not be afraid, as a second bullet point mentions, to ask them to repeat themselves or to further discuss something with you that you may just not understand, right? And it is okay to interject during the conversation to ask the interview to elaborate on a point that you may not understand, but also just make sure to do it, eloquently, make sure that it's done correctly, not just like rudely interjecting and saying, well, what did you just mean right there? There's a proper way to go about that. So we'll go over the 12 rules of asking better questions, right? The art of asking questions is considering what responses you prefer and framing those questions to maximize your chances of you getting those answers that you want out of the interview. And this is a bit me jumping the gun, but this all goes into what we'll talk about in a bit, which is controlling the narrative of the interview itself. You have a lot more power than you think in this conversation. It's just about doing it effectively. And of course, implementing that preparation beforehand in build up to asking these questions during the interview itself, right? So what are these different questions? Asking open-ended questions, keeping it short, using inclusive language that makes sense to both parties, asking questions that the interviewer can answer as well. You don't want to look like you understand different parts of the company that are not department specific to the person you're speaking with. So you don't want to sound aloof and potentially make the conversation uncomfortable. Avoiding questions that are obvious or easy to determine as well. Make sure that your questions are complex. They actually make sense and build into the conversation. They don't just take away and really ask for yes or no answers. Avoiding asking questions that can be demeaning or condescending. This going a bit back to that using inclusive language. You don't want to ever make it uncomfortable, right? Avoid leading or loaded questions, which if you guys don't know, leading questions are typically those questions that already have an answer within them as well. Those are a bit redundant. They don't show that you understand things really well. And most of the time they can get a sense that you're just trying to make yourself seem more knowledgeable about what you're getting into, but can really come off as a condescending question. Avoiding hidden threats as well. Questions that hint of desperation of you really wanting the job as well. Not asking questions that are relevant to the job organization. That goes obvious. Being genuinely curious. Relaxing and smile obviously throughout the whole session, especially when you get nervous or feel like you may have misstepped or potentially messed up with one of these different rules. It's okay to just compose yourself, relax, and continue to go through the questions that you will be doing in the interview. So, as I mentioned, we'll be talking about controlling the narrative to make this conversation work for you. So first element of this is building that rapport, right? So now we're going to get a bit more into the actual specific pieces of that interview, guys. So while you are in the hot seat, the interviewer, you should remember, is also a person, right? A lot of us tend to go and sit down and think that we're ready to spit out answers to a robot across the table. That's not the case. If you're able to build a good community between yourself and the interviewer early on, that's a great opportunity for you to then open up the door to start controlling this interview narrative. So what are some good elements to try to do that? Asking how they're doing, how their day has been, and reading their body language just to get a read for how they may be so that you can adjust yourself to be on the same wavelength as them. Also, reading the room. Does the office atmosphere have anything you can relate to? One thing that I've shared a lot in a couple other professional development workshops is really looking at getting a sense for the environment that you are around and trying to pull in relatable artifacts that might be in the room itself, maybe something on the lapel of the interviewer that you guys can relate on very quickly just to break that ice off the bat. And also becoming an ally during this rapport building. If they seem nervous, sometimes you may deal with HR generalists or talent acquisitionists that are a month into the job itself. And you will pretty easily be able to tell upon that. Make them feel comfortable with you. And they'll note that, if they're new to the job and you give them a really great sense of, okay, they understand me, they made me feel good about my job as the interviewer, that's a great bonus point for yourself. And also, you may come across some that already went through 50 interviews before you and they just seem tired or disinterested. That's a showing for you to pick up the tempo off the bat, right? So that you can leave there being a differentiated candidate and really leave them with an impression. So then leading the conversation. This is extremely important to look at now, guys, as you try to control the narrative so that you get built to that point where you start being the interviewer for them in a sense. Being bold and relentless in your introduction. If you did your effective research in the preparation phase, you'll be able to answer most of the interviewer's questions in one swift elevator pitch about yourself. What a lot of candidates tend to do in the interview is give their general elevator pitch. Hi, my name is this. I used to work in this industry. These were my responsibilities. This was my previous education. It's nice to meet you. If someone wants to effectively kill it in controlling this narrative, they will only really share details about their previous work experience and education as it relates to the job description and company itself. So if you can effectively do this, most of the time the interview will be across the table and just cross off a couple of boxes already for yourself, which will allow you to get to the more fun part of the interview quicker, a lot quicker on. Creating an environment for fun as well, guys. Asking an immediate question about an odd or interesting aspect of the job or company which you pulled from your research can set a tone that avoids surface level discussion. I've been in the interview hot seat. Maybe a lot of you on this call have as well. You have your points that you need to cover, but many times you may have come across the fact that a lot of them are redundant in a sense, and if they're not a candidate that really interests you, you just want to get through them as fast as possible. But if you come across a really good candidate, you've noticed that early on, they've already set a great tempo to have a great conversation with you. And for them, you may find yourself getting off script a bit and wanting to get deeper into the job description with them, letting them know a little bit more about the company itself. And this is what a candidate can effectively do if they just set up the environment correctly and bring their disposition to really build on that environment with the interview across the table. Focusing on your body language as well is crucial to leading the conversation, right? There's different parties to this. Some people think like you should have this more dominative, like shoulder up stance to them. Some think that you should be a little more submissive, so you're ready to take on questions and make the interview feel more comfortable, like they're engaged, more in control of the conversation. In my experience with my students, I've seen that they've had the best success when they meet the interviewer on the same level of body posture, right? So not showing dominance, not showing submissiveness, being welcoming in your demeanor, embodying good posture regardless of what their situation is. They might be slouching. Obviously, you don't want to get down to that level as either, but just meeting them on that same wavelength so that, again, you can create that environment for fun and avoid that potential surface level discussion that's really just the interviewer, checking off marks for you. Awesome. So now step one, and this is going back to that slide where I showed you guys culture, job, and company. These are now those questions that you will ask the interviewer yourself about each of those main elements of the job for yourself, right? So first, when you build this rapport and you feel like you've gotten comfortable with the interviewer, that's when now you have this ability to start interjecting and asking your own questions and really getting in the head of the interviewer to, pull in opportunities of these questions that you asked to elevate yourself as a great candidate, because in a way you can get the answers that you want if you structure them correctly. So first, when trying to find out about the culture, you want to find out, do I belong here, essentially? And the best way to know about that is knowing as much as you can about the culture and day-to-day of the employee itself, right? So what are those different kind of questions that you can ask? What does a day-to-day like look for an employee of this company? What's the last biggest achievement that was celebrated here? What activities does the company offer employees? What does the team do for lunch? What continuing learning opportunities do you have for employees? As you'll note, none of these questions talk about specifics of the job itself. They don't ask about specifics of the company's financials, specifics as to anything really like hard skilled wise on the job description side as well, right? These are more like lofty kind of soft questions about basically, do you like working here? And can you tell me about, the typical day-to-day of the employee itself? Is the general consensus here that everyone's having a good time? Are people more head down on their work? They like to clock in, clock out, and just be efficient at work? And you want to know these things because as it relates to you as a professional, you probably don't want to go in. If you're someone like, say, myself, I'm a bit more of an extroverted person. I like to communicate as much as I can with my employees when it's appropriate. I would like to work somewhere where I can have hallway talk, where I can message on Slack at any time of day. I want to know those things. Based on these culture questions where you're asking, like, how do the employees communicate on a day-to-day? How does management communicate with the employees? What do you guys do? Do you guys hang out on the weekends at all? Are there company holidays, vacations that you guys do together? Though all those questions will be able to note to you, will I have a good time here? Will I enjoy myself here? Will I see myself grow? Do I see myself finding camaraderie amongst the employees that I may potentially work with if I do attain this position? And step 2, the job. Where and how can your skills be best used, right? So this is great not only for notice and knowing if you are the right fit, but also maybe in your application you did not get to denote a specific detail about your previous job experience. That can be a great booster for yourself as a candidate within the interview itself, right? So while you're asking the questions about the job specifically and knowing if the job is right for you, these questions can uncover opportunities for you to talk about more about yourself and really bolster yourself up as a great candidate as compared to others that will just go over the surface level questions that are asked, right? So what sort of questions are those, right? What do the day-to-day responsibilities of this role look like? That one's a bit obvious and should be typical asked in every interview. What are the characteristics of your best employees in this position as well? This one goes into what I mentioned in the ladder. To know what the best 1 or 2 employees are doing within the company itself gives you a great opportunity to hear, oh, they are weekend warriors and we really appreciate that they put in that work. And it just so happens that you're that sort of person that puts that passion into your work. It's great to be able to know, oh, that's awesome to hear that. Myself in my previous job, I loved it so much. I would put in job on projects on the weekends and prep myself up on Sundays to be ready to go on Monday. So I definitely relate to your best employees that do that themselves, right? And that's another, maybe not even check mark, but bonus point in the head of the interviewer when they're relaying their information to decision makers. What does the success look like in this position? Pretty similar to the previous question. Who will I be working with closely, right? What are the most common issues this role could potentially run into? So this gives you an opportunity to talk about previous experience where you've run into a similar issue and how you found a solution to that. Maybe the position is completely new and you can ask why your company decided to create this position and what are the growth opportunities for this role. So again, before I move on to the next slide, guys, not only do you get to know from the interviewer's answers if the position is right for you, but these uncover opportunities as well for you to talk about even more how you relate as a great candidate for the position itself upon the answers that they do give you. Step 3, learning about the company. Can I grow here? Do I see myself being here in the long term? Or, is there no potential opportunity for me to grow as an employee within the structure here? The different questions that you can ask around this. So what is your favorite aspect of working here? That starts to build in a little bit to how the interviewer relates to the company and really getting you to understand, do they enjoy their work here themselves? Are they growing within here? What is the company's growth plan for the next 5 to 10 years? This is great for organization wide and understanding if there's going to be a potential for you to move into leadership positions within the company. Will there be a need for new departments? And you may be able to bring up the fact that you've built out new departments or new projects within your old employments. What do you consider your top competitor and why? This one can potentially be a little controversial, but based on their answer can give you a great idea as to how the company itself relates to the rest of the ecosystem of competitors it does have, right? They may give you a pretty shady answer about a competitor. You might be like, oh, I don't know if I like that, that culture. I don't know if I like how you guys depict your competitors. Or they may have a really friendly ambiance with whoever the competitor is, and then that may be fruitful for you. And you might be like, oh, that's great. I love this friendly competition and pushing each other in the ecosystem. Other questions. What are the biggest opportunities currently presented to the company? What are the biggest challenges the company is facing right now? Again, like the previous slide can give you an opportunity to talk about your previous experience facing similar issues. I saw that you recently received funding from XYZ Capital. Why did you decide to work with them? This not only gives you an idea where the company is going, but maybe the culture as well. Who are they aligning their partnerships with? And how will this position contribute most to the company's vision? So this pulls in a little more onto the job side, but when it comes to the company, you get to really realize, does this role really have a growth potential? Does this role have an opportunity to innovate, make, and shake things within the company structure? Or am I potentially finding myself in an opportunity where I might be pigeonholed and me already have met a plateau upon employment in this opportunity? And is that even something I want to consider for myself? Awesome. Let me see. All right. So then wrapping up your story, both parties should leave with an impression. So typically people will go into the interview and think, oh, awesome. I think I left a good note with them, and that's great. But if you really care about the role and really care about where your career trajectory is going, you should leave with an impression yourself as well. Some of us tend to kind of put this to the side and really just want to move up with employment. And given some different variables right now with COVID and, people wanting to get that employment, regardless, you got to think about your future, right? So it's very important that you take from this experience, not only what was given, but also what was given from their end as well. So you, in this interview, closing up, should have the last say. This is a best practice that I share with all my students. I believe that to leave them with the best impression, you're the one that asks the last question, to really complete the narrative of everything that encompass that interview itself and a presentation of yourself. Those great last questions typically look like, how do you see the company moving from here on out? Or I'm really excited about this role. What are the potential next steps for a good candidate to do in build up for the next interview, right? Just asking a question that really leaves them with, this person was engaged throughout the interview. This person actually cared about the opportunity. This person will follow up with me and is somebody I should keep in touch with and keep at top of mind when considering other applicants, right? Typically your closing statement, or I shouldn't say statement, closing question can be that one element that differentiates you from the 10 other candidates that interviewed that same day, right? How do you close that out? By making it meaningful, and of course, invoking the call to action with it, right? And that's why I mentioned that last question, asking them, what are the next steps? What can I do best from here on out? How can I best be in touch with you guys to follow up with you during this interview process? Right, that's all great stuff as well. You don't want to leave there empty-handed, which a lot of us tend to do in interviews, which is not knowing when we're going to hear back or hoping to get an email after. You should just put it on them to let you know what the next steps in the process look like. So now, what sort of questions do you want to ask yourself in evaluating if the opportunity is right for you? Do I fit the culture of the company? Am I the right person for this opportunity? Will I enjoy my time here? And can I grow here as a professional? Right? These are a lot of times, based on your research, you may be able to get that. During the interview, you will definitely be able to get that because you have led the conversation to really pull in these different insights for yourself, engaging if the opportunity does align with your career trajectory, with the industry that you want to work in, with the specific responsibilities that you see yourself being most effective in day to day, Monday to Friday, even the weekend, right? So yeah, and essentially that does kind of wrap up my session, guys. It's a bit shorter, as in interviewing the interviewer, guys, it's not the most prevalent thing that you need to really focus on the interviewer. Regardless, you want to be best presented for yourself, right? So if you do find yourself focusing potentially too much on, does the opportunity really align with me? Do I really like the company itself? Those should already be red flags for you to really know if you should go into the interview itself or not, right? But in the case that this opportunity is something that you really care about, that you really see yourself sitting in the seat of that job description, then you should be doing these things, not only to understand if they're the best fit for you, but also by interviewing the interviewer, you are showing that engagement. You are showing that you're vested into the opportunity itself to the person sitting across the table from you. So it's important for both parties, regardless, to interview them themselves, ask the questions that you can, just making sure that they're appropriate, that they show engagement, and that they make sense and are meaningful for the whole narrative of what the interview is in relation to yourself, bolstering yourself as a good candidate. And then I leave you guys with just understand that you are in control of the narrative of your presentation in the interview itself. So never feel like you're kind of in the submissive position where you have to just take all the questions that they have and just answer. If you prepare yourself eloquently, know what you want to present before going into interview, not only in your introduction, but the questions that you want to ask, and leading that conversation for it to be beneficial for both parties, and then closing it out with a meaningful closing statement and question, you will leave from that interview knowing that you were as in control as you could be, and understanding if the position potentially is right for you. And if it is, going ahead in the next steps, following up and following that sort of same process in the next interviews to come. Awesome. All right. So yes, thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you do want to learn more about us, you guys can go to wyncode.co. A lot of our stuff is there. If you guys do want to get in touch with myself, my information is in the Wyncode channel. But you can also just email me, Beto at wyncode.co, not .com, if you do feel like you want to get in touch with me directly. And on another note, I'm also very involved in the Palm Beach Tech Slack. You can find me there day to day. So if you guys do want to reach me through there, my name is Beto Garza. Okay. Awesome, Nikki. So I think that's it for me. Actually, I guess I'll open up. Do you guys have any questions at all for myself?
I didn't see any in the chat, but I did get a couple private messages. Ali or Monica, did you guys see any on social? Nothing yet. Okay, so I'll give you what I have. So I wanted to go back to, it was one of your earlier slides, Beto, about Glassdoor. Some people I feel like either love it, and that's where they go to get a lot of feedback from companies, and other people hate it because they feel like it's just a site where people go, like ex-employees, to vent. So what is your, I guess, advice on sifting through some of those comments and kind of finding what's real and what's not real, and just what's your opinion on some of those sites?
Awesome. I love that question. That's great. Because we run into this issue a lot, especially in tech roles. In the tech industry, guys, we tend to have a lot of turnover that goes on, and not even just turnover, but a lot of employees move around from companies, some in 3 different companies within the same year itself. It's typical of this industry. So on Glassdoor, especially with tech companies, you will find a lot of hate towards management, towards job responsibilities, and maybe too many tasks being handed to you. What I like for my students to take from those reviews is just, getting a general consensus for what's the mean average of, like, what's it called, culture that they understand from it, especially when looking at the specific job roles that those people held, right? So in the case that, let's say, the job roles that you're seeing a lot of reviews from are specific to what you're getting yourself into, you should try to pull in from each, not the whole narrative that they're depicting to you, but where are those commonalities between the reviews? Are they more focused towards the job load? Maybe there's just too many tasks and unrealistic expectations. That's going to be something that's going to be difficult for you to depict from the About Us page of the company or social media. So that's something that you're already prepping up to try to uncover in the interview itself, right? So what is the best way to go about that? When asking the job specific step 2 questions in the interview, just mentioning, what does the day-to-day look like? Now, if they tell you, oh, we're very understanding, we're all hands on deck, leadership here is always there to mentor and help out any of our, let's say, junior software developers in their tasks, but you read on Glassdoor that was completely opposite, that's a red flag for you, right? What I don't want you to take from Glassdoor is that you see all these bad reviews and immediately you're just like, okay, this might not be the opportunity for me. If the company still meets your needs in terms of growth, as what it seems, maybe the brand is something that you mesh with correctly, give that phone screen and first interview a chance. Okay, I've never told my students, just based on their Glassdoor reviews or other things I may have seen maybe on Indeed as well, that they should just completely disregard that opportunity just because of what they've seen there. In a lot of cases, as I think the person that asked the question, Nikki, mentioned, most people are going there to vent. They had a bad experience. They might have been fired because they themselves were not a good employee during that time. So take that with a grain of salt, but add that into your ammunition with preparing your questions for the interview itself. Hope that answers the question.
Yes, good answer. Because I know that comes up a lot.
Yes, yeah, there's a lot of hate talk on there, so yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Another one was you had mentioned, which I love, about asking questions to gauge, I guess, like or create like an environment for fun during the interview, which I really love. But my question, this is coming from me personally, was just from my past staffing experience. Not everybody is as extroverted or I guess puts together, words well to kind of get their ideas across. So I know that sometimes we would have issues with candidates, their level of like appropriateness during an interview. So could you give like a couple examples of like good questions that might do that to create an environment for fun during the interview?
Yeah, sure thing. I think, yeah, appropriateness is crucial in this. Some people may like, hey, what you don't, maybe I'll give like the bad scenarios first that may, Nikki, you may have been into. Maybe just the questions that you ask to set up the environment you should gauge by reading first the person that you're going with against, right? If they immediately like welcome you with a steady handshake, they seem happy and jolly and already joking with you, that should set the tempo. But most of the time you will come across a more neutral aspect, right, where the person's professional, they're there just to kind of get the job done with you, and you want to set that tempo for a potential fun conversation. You don't want to go ahead and mention, oh, you look great today. Okay, well, you don't know if that person has built that rapport with you yet. Also, potentially like starting with distractions off the bat, that could show that you're nervous going into the interview. So saying, oh, I saw that mug, go Redskins, and that's it. The questions should develop into conversation to break that ice for yourself, right? So say that Redskins mug was up there. You don't just mention, oh, that the mug's up there, go Redskins. You just say, oh, I noticed that mug up there. Are you yourself a Redskins fan? Like that's pretty cool. I'm actually from, I hope it's Washington. If it's not Washington, I'll be messed up. I'm not the best with sports, guys. But you mentioned, and then they'll say, oh, yes, I am. And oh, that's great. And then suddenly you guys are a little more personal. You guys have something to relate on, right? But yes, as Nikki mentions, you want to avoid at all costs, like making a sense of uncomfortability or you coming in at a high tempo off the bat that can off base the interviewer themselves. So maybe another case that I could point to, Nikki, is when you're coming in with high energy and you start the question asking as well. That's not the point of interviewing the interviewer. You want to set the tempo based on what you get from them the first couple minutes in the interview. You want to go in immediately. Yeah, it's good to ask, how's your day going? But then not asking a slew of 2 to 3 other questions to follow up before they can even get to their first question back at you either, right? That may completely turn them off and make them feel a bit like imposed on, when really it's them that's supposed to be leading the situation. So in you effectively leading the conversation, you're doing it to meet with them, right? That's what we mean by when you're interviewing the interview, you control the narrative. You're asking the right questions to pull the right insights, not asking just a ton of questions so that you seem like you're on their same level and you guys are almost competing, I hope that answers your question as well.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I actually like that you added almost like mirroring the person that you're talking to, because sometimes, like you said, you're going to get somebody maybe is quieter or more shy themselves, or maybe they're a higher level if you're talking to the CEO or VP or something versus somebody that's maybe a middle manager that might be easier to talk to. So I think, yeah, just a lot of times mirroring who you're talking to. So I'm glad you said that too. I've got one more question here, unless Monica or Ali, you've got anything from social. So you had mentioned like being okay to clarify things throughout the interview that you may not understand. The question came through, what about if you're clarifying something and you think that the answer may lead to something negative? Do you still question that then, or send a follow-up email? Kind of what's the safe route to do that if you think it may not be the answer you want to hear?
I love that question. That's great. In that scenario, this is where practice comes in, unfortunately, right? You, upon doing a couple interviews, you're gonna regardless come across a situation where you don't understand something, and you should become comfortable with being able to ask, can you develop upon that? But you can kind of, safety build yourself in a sense by the preparation that you do and understanding the job description itself. So as long as you know what the job description entails, especially on the hard skill side, so understanding the software tools, product management and project management methodologies, previous experience with specific certifications, things like that, you don't want to go in empty-handed, not at least knowing the background of some of those things. So maybe like on the more development, let's say web development side, If there's XYZ technologies that they utilize and you have never touched two of them, go into that interview understanding that you may be asked about those, and already knowing that, okay, no, I don't understand. Actually, can you say the interview asks you about utilizing JavaScript, right? And you have not touched JavaScript. Asking them, hey, myself, I haven't utilized it much myself in my professional experience. May I ask to what degree you guys are utilizing within your software product development, right? That's a question that maybe derives a bit more like you understanding that that's something the job description already asked for, and you were prepared to ask the interviewer, I want to know more because I'm eager to know and I'd like to learn. I'm sitting across you from the interview because my resume meets at least what you guys are looking for in a sense. So I'm already understanding, I'm being very honest and frank with you that that's not something that I bring to the table, but I am curious to learn more, right? So I'd say that's typically your best bet, but regardless, you're gonna misstep sometimes, and you may ask something they may have to mark does not have proficiency or knowledge of XYZ technology or skill set. That's fine, right? But it's just about appropriately going about it. And of course, in your presentation of that question, to ask for further clarification or elaboration, not just asking, what is that? Oh, what did you just said that, what is that? That means that you didn't prepare correctly, right? If they do mention something that wasn't on the job description at all whatsoever, then in that case, you can say, oh, that's interesting. Upon my research before this interview, I didn't notice that you guys used XYZ technology. Do you actually mind developing a bit on that? That kind of shows that you're mentioning the fact that you did your research, that this is new news to you, and you just want to know more, right? So there's ways of structuring the question, but regardless, like, it's up to decision maker if that means that you're not proficient, or are you genuinely curious and you're willing to learn more. A great question.
Yeah.
No, that's a very good
Nikki,
answer too.
I have
Does Dennis, you have a question too, Dennis?
Yeah, Beto, thank you. I think it was a great, very succinct way to cover a lot of territory in one call. In a usual call where it's set up, 10 o'clock on Tuesday morning, we're talking to Beto for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever. You can structure it, go through that. But what's different about virtual career fairs, or just career fairs in general, particularly the premier virtual format, where it seems like there's small slots where you can casually interact a little bit, but I don't think you get a full dedicated slot unless that's set aside later. So is there any highlights on what's different when you're doing it sort of in this environment via Zoom versus just sort of in a career format versus a set aside, here's the 45 minutes to talk to you?
Sure thing. So I think me and Nikki can both kind of piggyback on that question. So in in this situation remote itself, when it comes to dialogue and still trying to pull in those insights that you want out of conversation, you should try to emulate the same sort of structure. But regardless, when you are in a career fair, you're speaking with potentially 15 to 20 plus employers. So it's going to be difficult for you to prep yourself up effectively for each and be able to structure yourself so that you switch your understanding of each company when you're doing back-to-back interviews, right? In these cases, they're more, the employer is ready to speak to many people, and you yourself should be ready to speak to many people as well. So it's not as much as about, regardless, you should prepare yourself, understand what you can about the companies, especially those that you're interested in. But the tone of it will be a bit different as to them wanting to get through as many candidates as possible, because an employer typically goes into this career expos to get the broadest idea of the talent that's out there, right? To get the most diverse opportunity to get talent rather than doing direct talent acquisition and finding candidates themselves, right? So you should just adjust yourself accordingly and just be prepared to essentially tell a lot of the same dialogue about yourself in your introduction, your elevator pitch, the questions that you ask generally. And maybe if you just have those general questions prepared ahead of time, that can then allow you to decide and evaluate later on after the career expo, which are those companies that you want to follow up with to make sure that you show that you're an engaged candidate that they met with during the expo itself.
Okay. Hey, thanks, Beto.
No worries. Nikki,
yeah, I agree. And I would say, I think just to add to that is this is a little bit different because it's obviously, like you said, Dennis, it's not a set interview already. It's an expo where you're kind of going in and trying to catch their attention. So I think for something like this, and specifically with the Premier Virtual platform, because they do have like the chat functions, I mean, that's definitely one way to catch the hiring manager's attention, is by asking good questions. So that's literally what this is about this morning. So this is perfect. But, you know, instead of going in and just applying directly to the job and just dropping your resume and leaving it at that and hoping they call you back, use some of these tactics that we're learning this morning and go into the chat function, you know, and again, hopefully that you're actually researching the company that you're going to be dropping some chat questions into, but saying, hey, you know, I've looked into the company and I know this, and this about you. I'm super interested in this role. I just had a couple questions, you know, that I'd hope that you guys can, you know, get back to me on, and dropping some really hard, like good questions. And then that'll draw them, you know, to you, because like, oh, wow, this guy's actually done his research. He's asking like really good concrete questions, instead of, I know a lot of people that, you know, don't do their research. And then when they, you know, either during an interview or things like this at a career expo, the first thing they do is go up to a booth and they'll ask a question that's like right on the front page of the website or right in the job description.
Yeah.
So that immediately will turn off the hiring manager, like, okay, you didn't even read. So I would definitely, like Beto says, is do your research, come up with a couple really good concrete questions, drop those in chat. And I think that that's a really good way to catch the attention of the hiring manager, instead of with just.
Thanks, Nikki and Beto. Because I think that's one difference, is that during most phone interviews, you know, chat's out of the picture. You're not doing texting while you're talking to the person if you want the job.
Mm-hmm.
But in this case, that dynamic is another aspect to think a little bit about, and that is new. So thanks, Nikki.
Yeah.
I did see the email resent, but it's also one of the many Palm Beach Tech emails I got. So yes, I do have to thank you. And Beto, I'll probably follow up on Wyncode. I was just with Todd Albert for a while on their Boca Code launch. So
yeah, what they're doing is
I like that you're doing some reschooling there, Dennis.
Oh, you know, I've told many people what to program, but getting back in and looking at the current React and different libraries, it's a whole new world. So it's different when you're not at the whiteboard just saying, okay, go off and we'll talk on Friday, versus doing it. So, and Boca Code's great, but WinCaddy definitely is. WinCode has a great reputation too.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, and I don't know, Beto, do you want to kind of tell us a little about, to anybody that's listening, just about the Unite and Fight Hackathon? Is there anything you can kind of overview with that? Since I think that's this Friday, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for pointing to that, Nikki. So yeah, actually,
Sure.
so Wyncode is partnering up with. Let me see if I can get through everyone. Emerge Americas, Code Fever, South Florida Tech. We also have I already mentioned Code Fever, Venture Cafe, and the Miami-Dade Beacon Council, just to get together and do a hackathon that will actually be happening this Friday from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. that will focus on building solutions to combat racism. While that can be a very general topic that requires a lot of different solutions, we're fortunate to actually be hosting lightning talks the night before, starting at 6:30, so this Thursday, where we'll be hosting a panel of different leaders in the Black tech community, including the NAACP, Make the Homeless Smile, Black Men and Black Women Talk Tech, who will be talking about different initiatives that they're working on with their organizations. As well as some individuals coming in to talk about their own personal experiences as well, and how we can potentially coordinate with the technical teams and product design teams to build solutions to combat their situations. And then the really cool thing, that there will be no winner on Friday for the hackathon. What we'll be doing is, on a bi-weekly basis, a meetup that's focused on continuing to build those solutions for those that want to persevere on building out their solutions with their paired up organization. And then presenting the final solutions at the Emerge Americas conference, which I believe was rescheduled to April of early next year. So quite a long time. So
I think it was 26th and 27th, if I'm not mistaken, in April.
Somewhere
Yeah.
in between. So yeah, it's gonna be great. Yeah, so you're gonna see some really fine, polished applications built by then, and it's just really exciting to be part of that. And thank you so much, South Florida Tech, for being an ecosystem partner of this initiative.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we're proud to. And I actually, for anybody that's still in here in the Zoom, I did drop that in chat as well. And then Beto, if there's anything that you want to send us, with the follow-up email this morning, we'll make sure to include either your email, the link. I don't know if you want to send this slide, anything that you have that you want us to include. We'll make sure to get that out today as well.
I'll get a little package with the bow.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I mean, this was probably one of the best presentations we've had too, so I really appreciate it.
Flattering. Thank you so much. Thank you guys so much. Dennis, I appreciate your questions and everyone else that was involved, by the way. And Nikki, thank you again always for being such an awesome
All
partner.
right. Thank you. Bye,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye.
Hey, y'all. Have a good one.